Hello and welcome to Womb Stories Project. So glad to have you here. Today we're sharing a beautiful and powerful conversation with Yasmine Minnifield of Wombs of Peace. And today, really more than a conversation, this is us receiving Yasmine's transmission, her insights, her story of the importance of reclaiming, rebuilding feminine health and leadership through the exploration of healing the father wound, healing our own inner masculine as a way to fully step into our feminine power. I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Yasmine, and thank you so much for being here. Rachel and I and our guitar team are so excited to do this episode with you of Womb Stories Project to really help people learn from you about healing their trauma and how we can use this medicine of steam that means so much to all of us to really support this level of healing. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and welcome.
Thank you. So excited.
Let's start through your own transmission. How do you understand the father wound?
For me, the father wound always pricks us first in our most personal experience with a father figure or a paternal figure. Growing up, when we have that timeline of our life, when we're little teenagers, early 20s, whatever major experience we had. And recently, I've seen it even prick experiences with fathers of children, like that you have had children with. Somebody called it the baby daddy wound. And I was like, ooh, that's a thing. And so I think there's that aspect of it that is visceral and we can all relate to. But going deeper into what it really is, it exists on a cellular level. And this is deeper than just talking about trauma. It's about restoring a root level sense of coherence where we're going into the feminine psyche, the cellular function of the feminine body, but also the mineral blueprint. Minerals are so foundational to having the spark of life. It's what gives life to water, and we are water beings. So when we spark our minerals and their balance, we see a repatterning begin to just distribute to the entire feminine system. So I like to call minerals now father source codes. And when we can tap into those as balancing mechanisms that help us restore our original blueprint, how we were designed to operate and function before distortion took place in life. Then we can look at the father wound through a much deeper lens that is something less abstract, something very tangible that we can bring different types of medicine to. So we can approach this repatterning through somatics, through mineral balancing, but also through Yoni Steaming and womb healing.
So, what I'm hearing from you is that there is this one vertical of understanding that the father wound does encompass challenges we might have felt with our own paternal father, with people we have experienced in the fathering role. Maybe we've parented with them as father. But also this wider fathering messages that we receive and figures that are named as such in our culture, in our society.
Mhm.
Some of the work I've been doing around this has been using a slightly different term, that wounded masculine, and really coming into our own, regardless of our identities, but our own healed masculine. And so thank you for that because it helps me see just how important this relationship to the father, lower and capital F, really is to our healing of the wounded inner masculine.
Thought came up as you were sharing that it's also about the pattern of what's the word I'm looking for? Starts with a P, patriarchy, and the deeper messages we've received in the feminine psyche around patriarchy for many generations. And that's not something that is just personal. That's so large sweeping, right? And there's messages there that we may not even be conscious that we're running. And because we're the receptive polarity, we receive those messages, we take them in, and whatever we receive, we create an abundance, we multiply, right? And it's also housed in the womb. She is a container, a holy portal, but also a container, repository of our emotions and what's been passed down through DNA. So I really feel I love the wording that you're using to, shifting from the wounded to the healed masculine, because this is so deep in terms of womb healing, especially persistent patterns that may show up in the womb and the endocrine system in cervical health as well. And then the other piece is just paying attention to how we personally relate to the father line that we came from. Like you mentioned that lowercase and capital F. And I'm like, that's on the money. We have inherited many things that some we find positive, some we don't. Some feel empowering, some don't. But to name them all is absolutely empowering. To give it name and to set out on consciously reprogramming this at the psyche level. So to bring more language to use in exploring this, I love using archetypal and Jungian psychology, especially the work of Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And in her writing, coming into it in my 20s, that was such a heavy book to come into at that age, but I needed it. I became mother at 19, turning 20. So I needed to understand what was happening in my consciousness. She talks so much about the animus, the masculine part of the psyche in the woman. And so as we're exploring this, and even in my personal story, I found it so important to understand that in my psyche, there is a masculine part, just like how you see there is a bit of yin inside of the yang and a bit of yang inside of the yin in that symbol. That is true for our psyche. So when that animus, the masculine part of this feminine psyche, becomes collapsed or damaged or wounded through societal, ancestral, traumatic experiences. We are wounded in our sense of an internal sense of safety or the deserving to be protected, being comfortable and at ease in powerful roles and understanding our innate power of creativity, but also our deservedness of provision. So I'll share two layers of how this showed up for me personally. The first layer is in childhood. I will put out a trigger warning. This does contain some bits about abuse, in case anyone is sensitive to that. I was abused as a child by a family member, and it was known what happened. And unfortunately, my family made a decision, which was very true of many African American families in this era, to handle this within the family versus bringing in external authorities. There's no pressing charges, there's no going to therapy. You just deal with it. This person was threatened and told they would have bodily harm if they hurt me again, and they never did physically touch me again. But that generation didn't have an understanding of what PTSD is and how it can be even more deeply ingrained by consistent, prolonged exposure to your abuser. And so as I went through this with a family that I knew did love me, it left a lot of cognitive dissonance and a very acute trauma to my animus, my inner masculine. And so I began to believe that I didn't deserve to be protected, that there was something innately wrong with me. I shrunk myself to protect myself from being abused again. I also started to gain weight from first grade when it happened. You can visibly see the shift in photos where my body began to hold this excess weight as a protective mechanism. And in a lot of ways, because the protection was short lived, it fell into some provision wounds as well, where maybe you can have something, but not everything. You can have protection in this one case, but not extended protection. And so having PTSD at such an early age put my nervous system into a lot of shock and persistent times, right? And so I saw that my adrenal glands were shot. I developed PCOS by the age of 13. That include mine was insulin resistance and adrenal related. So you can directly make that connection between the father wounding and what began to present in my womb health and my endocrine and nervous system. And this does a number on the minerals. So as I began to go deeper, I saw low magnesium, high sodium. That is a classic pattern of adrenal burnout. It was very hard for my body to metabolize calcium for a while. I had to really work to balance that level. And we, in naturopathic terms, call that a calcium shell. And this is like one of those father source codes I was talking about. When you see a calcium shell for yourself, you begin to become very armored, like you want to stay protected. And I definitely fit the bill for that in my teens and 20s. I was very protective of myself and I kept men on a short leash. Like you could not go too far with me emotionally. I would like to call myself solo poly. I will date you, but I will not commit to you because I'm committed to myself and I had a hardened exterior. So on a cellular level, calcium begins to become deposited around and the cell becomes very stiff. This becomes joint pain, achiness, emotional repression. You're in a frozen state in your nervous system because your body begins to mute everything. Everything is too much. So you become numb, emotionally repressed, flat, and frozen, and armored, and unreachable, and untouchable. So this is high calcium, the calcium shell, and low magnesium. Low magnesium is another father source code. We've heard this so much about take your magnesium, do the oil, take the supplement. But it's more than that. When you have low magnesium, you cannot receive. You just can't. You won't let yourself stop doing everything. You just do because you're so used to overextending. I have to do it all. I can't trust somebody else to do it. That your magnesium becomes low. So without balancing it and having high calcium, you're numb and exhausted and frozen and not accepting support. So then when I began to balance it out, it was originally through herbal infusion and Yoni Steaming. And these two methods came in my postpartum experience with my midwife. And she broke it down like, okay, mama, I got the first like squat over the bowl method. And she taught me how to make my infusions. And that was my introduction to nettle leaf. I got into the work of Susan Weed and all her herbal magic. And I learned about oat straw and red raspberry and red clover and linden and all these beautiful herbal allies, motherwort. And the infusions just seemed to soften it. It felt like a heart opening, yoni softening. Just, you take that deep breath and then you exhale and that sigh, and then the yoni just softens and you open the pelvic bowl. Yeah, and that jaw opens and unclenches. It's like that, but in a very deep, persistent way inside yourself where you feel the calcium shell begin to disintegrate. Your joints move easier. There's no more creaky, loud knees. Arthritis diagnoses reverse. Then your magnesium will come back into play. And now you can tell people what you need. So soft and able to articulate I need you to come over here and help me chop up all this butternut squash because I really just need a nap. And my sister friends could show up for me. Their father could show up for me, you know? So those are like really big moments in my life that healing the father wound became pronounced. But in the most recent season, I went deeper into studying Yoni Steaming with Steamy Chick
Hmm.
and applying that certification and knowledge to myself first, of course. I began to steam more regularly. So I used to just do it every now and again when I felt called. But then I put myself on a protocol. I used her formulas, the right ones. And I also implemented what I call archetypal medicine, where I went and queried the oracle and I used the oracle system from ancient Egypt, the Kemetic system, as well as the Chinese I Ching oracle system. So I use them in congruence. And I did a reading on what is the energy governing me healing the father wound and strengthening my animus. That was like an epic reading. And it was very ancestral. That was one card that came up. But it was positive because we do have a positive and a negative ancestral card. And this was a positive ancestor. So it told me like my ancestors are cheering for me. There is drums playing in the ancestral round. They're celebrating. They're like, yeah, girl, we got you. They standing here with me in the gap. And the other one was Sebek. And Sebek, you can think if you're not familiar with the energy, this is like a very Mercury type of energy. Think Hermes in myths. Think trickster gods. Think Alegba in the Ifa tradition. This is a crossroads energy like Ganesh. All of these deities are archetypal energies that have the same core essence. And so I knew that I was on the precipice of something profound. But when this card comes, it says, you're at a crossroads. You have some decisions to make about how you're going to run things. And there's a fork in the road. You're either going to go left or right. And so I said, okay, I know what it is. I'm overextending myself. I need to give energy back to me. So I ended up collapsing the current container that I was running for group coaching. And I repatterned my business model to have more space to do things like Yoni steaming and breast massage and castor oil packs and gua sha abdominal massage and chanting my mantras for these archetypal medicines, going into ritual with my ancestors at the river. I needed time to do these things, and I took that time back. And what I saw was a release where I was releasing a lot of stagnant old tissue from the uterus, and it felt so good to know like this is not just tissue, like this is emotional, this is debris, this is clearing ancestral rot. This is the rot that other generations didn't have the space and capacity to clear or handle or heal. And I get to put like one hand on heart and one hand on my womb and just say clear, heal, transmute, and delete.
Mm.
And I would say that sitting on my pot, my stool. Now I've upgraded. I'm not sitting over a bowl now. I got a wooden stool on my throne, and listening to the mantras of the archetypes and calling in the assistance of my ancestors and talking to the trillions of cells like a matriarch, commanding them into what is coming next for this being, right? And I feel like through really inundating my system with my herbal infusions and mineral rich, nutrient rich foods, getting into the somatic practices, but then also sitting on that pot
Mhm.
and letting that steam open up my portal of healing and allow that debris to come out, to purge, to clear. And not just for me, but setting that intention for 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. That's like the most poignant experience to date that I've had with this father wound healing. And I was right in the middle of leading a whole group of women through the same experience. And by the end of it, I had better boundaries, higher self assurance, a greater capacity for abundance and opportunity. I could see the opportunities that were right in front of my face that I didn't see before. And then I met new women just like you all. I have come into a whole new network of luminaries because I'm not as dulled down by these myriad imbalances within my animus.
Thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. It's such a powerful transmission.
I think like a good coherent ending thought for me is these minerals, they've just the mineral kingdom
Mm.
has spoken to me in a new way. And they've been in my consciousness since 2011 when I first trained with the naturopath, Dr. Laila Africa. May he rest in peace. But he taught me, like this is the mineral wheel. And when you don't have enough calcium and manganese, you can't function properly, and all these good things that were conceptual, mental understanding. But something pricked my consciousness with hair analysis. I could do it the whole time in my practice all these years. But this year, I just knew I had to go deeper. It was speaking to me. And that's when I started to really see these psychological, these psychosomatic patterns that begin to arise. And now these deeper archetypal patterns. So the minerals, the father codes are just when they're distorted, when they're missing, when they're low and unbalanced, the body mirrors that confusion. It holds tension where there should be clarity, it leaks energy where there should be lots of sound structure, and it overcompensates with control or collapse. But Yoni steaming rewrites those codes because all of the herbs that we use are mineral rich and not like a synthetic blend in a capsule. This is bioavailable, earth made synergy. So you're never going to get too much of this or too little of that. She delivers it in complete synergy. And when you're yoni steaming, it opens those drainage pathways in your lymphatic system, in the microcirculation in the yoni and the pelvic bowl. And all this fresh blood is delivered to the cervix, to the vaginal canal, the entire pelvic bowl. And with fresh blood comes fresh healing. Then we go into that parasympathetic state where healing can happen, where integration becomes possible. We restore zinc, magnesium, potassium. We can dissolve the calcium shell. So you're not just sitting here to just heal symptoms, even though that's powerful. We can release fibroids. We can help to heal endometriosis. We can help balance PCOS. Like so much can be done, right? And that's powerful. But when we look even deeper, there is a psychosomatic, energetic, ancestral potential is rebuilding the energetic structure of that internal father while you're sitting on that pot. So for anyone listening or watching, for your next Yoni Steam or your first Yoni Steam, I invite you to use that time to reflect on the condition of your father, your inner father, your masculine. and invite him if you felt abandoned to return. You can take that time to map out the father line and think about what's been passed down to you and what you intend to repattern while sitting on the pot. You can think about what's been passed down, and I think about them as counterfeit personality structures. These are the personality structures that we designed in response to trauma, but they're not you, though. And they can be dismantled and they can be burned away like masks. So you can sit on the pot and let that hot steam raise and decide what you're going to take off, what you're going to slough off, the mask you're going to release. And so when we use Yoni Steaming to its highest potential, we stop outsourcing protection. We reclaim our discernment and we open up sensitivity in those sacred tissue. It's not just about the uterus, it's not just about the vaginal canal. It's about the cervix. The cervix is literally the portal of life. She's so innervated with nerve tissue and she's so sensitive and she can be orgasmic and such a beautiful pleasure pathway. And we get to reconnect with all that power. We get to feel safe and powerful within these holy feminine bodies. And I really, more than anything, want our listeners to just take away from this that Yoni steaming is a hydrotherapy, but it's way, way more than that. And if you haven't experienced those benefits, this is an invitation to begin.
Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this incredible transmission from Yasmine. Go check her out over at Wombs of Peace. And please, 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 please sit with this medicine and share it with a friend or all the friends ready to understand the importance of the work that we are being called to do to heal our father wounds, heal our inner wounded masculine, knowing that this is a really important key to unlock how we can actually live as embodied, feminine, healthy, thriving, receptive beings. Subscribe and rate and review and share and all the things, please, so that we can continue to move with this community more widely, more deeply, and continue to spread the love, the healing, and the impact. Thank you, thank you, thank you.